Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out on this brutally chilly night to talk about zoning, a very exciting topic in my life, anyways. So I'm Steve Wallace, your town planner, and we're here to talk about zoning changes that the planning board and I would like to bring to next May's annual town meeting. Next slide. You've heard me say this before, but growth is inevitable. Sterling is going to continue to grow, and either you can plan to manage that growth or you can just let it happen. The good news is you do have a plan. It's your 2022 master plan. And the main takeaway I got out of it was it's time to update your 45-year-old zoning bylaw. So we're doing that because it's out of date, it's poorly written, confusing, and contradictory in places. When I got here 3 years ago, the planning board and I began a 3-year effort to revise the zoning, doing it in-house, and doing so saves the town a lot of money. Our first year, we focused on economic development zoning issues, and those were the zoning amendments we brought to you at last May's town meeting, and those passed. We've spent the summer working on residential development zoning changes, and that's what we're here to present to you tonight. The way we do zoning amendments with the planning board is we spend the summer writing them, then we spend the fall taking our amendments to all the relevant boards, commissions, and committees and telling them what we want to do, why we want to do it, and we get their feedback. And tonight concludes the first part of the feedback session, showing our zoning amendments to the general public. We're going to take your feedback. The planning board is going to spend its December and January meetings revising the zoning proposals based on what we hear. By the end of January, the finalized zoning amendments will be posted online. We'll have our required public hearing in March, and then it's off to town meeting. So that's the process that we go through. You folks are an important part of it. So let's move on and get into it. Residential zoning. Why now? Well, you may have noticed lately that the state has started to insert itself into local zoning issues. There was the MBTA Communities Act of 2020, which required communities that are considered MBTA communities set aside land for multifamily housing. We just went through that at the special town meeting, for those of you who were there. And then there's the Affordable Home Act of 2024, which said that towns must allow accessory apartments by right in all of its residential zoning districts. So this is the state's way of addressing the statewide housing crisis. And if you think the state is done inserting itself into local zoning matters, I've got a bridge in New York I'd like to sell you. See me after the forum and we'll talk. I would say it would behoove Sterling to do its own planning for residential development rather than wait for the state to do it for us. At some point, they're going to start taking a look at towns that are lagging behind on housing production, towns like Sterling and Princeton, and God knows what their solution would be. But we don't want to get to that point. Next slide. We also have an affordability issue, and this is region-wide. It's not just us. The area median household income for a family of 4 in Worcester County is $125,000. 80% of the area median income is $99,750. 80% and below, that's what the state targets for in terms of affordability. Average home price in Sterling is $575,000. The income you would need to afford that would be around $190,000. So homes are expensive, and in terms of affordability, the state has a law, MGL Chapter 40B, that requires every municipality to have at least 10% of its housing stock deemed affordable by the state. And if you don't have 10% of your housing stock deemed affordable, you can be subject to developments proposed under the state's comprehensive permit process. And that means a developer can come into town, build anywhere they want, regardless of our zoning, and at any density they can make work, and the town has little recourse in that. If you're wondering how we got Northgate, Northgate is a 40B project. So if we don't want to have another 40B and we want to control our own destiny in terms of housing, we need to get up to 10% of our housing stock being deemed affordable. We're close. Right now we're at 7.26%, and once the third building of Northgate gets built, we'll be up to 9.6%. So one of our zoning proposals is aimed at getting us over the hump in terms of the 10% affordability requirement. What have we done so far? Well, we prepared an update to our housing production plan. That is posted online on the Planning Board webpage. I think there's a link to it from our front page that has more data than you ever wanted to read about Sterling's housing situation. We also had a housing forum held in this room back in June, and we did a survey over the summer of 2025. The main takeaways I got was Sterling needs more housing for senior citizens and young families just starting out. So I want to read to you a letter from one of the people that filled out our housing survey over the summer. And I think it's instructive because I hear this all the time. I just wanted to share our perspective with you. As a blue-collar family, having had 2 adults and 1 child, with dad earning 99% of the income and mom staying home and raising the children, we now find ourselves in our late 50s planning what retirement will look like. We live in a modest 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-level home that we worked hard to pay off in 20 years. We now find that the property, snow shoveling, plowing, landscaping will probably be too much for us to do later in life, and the setup isn't ideal for aging. Our ideal would be a small 2-bedroom, single-story home with a small yard and driveway. Right now, we would be stretching it to sell what we have and buy something else. The new buildings in town are over 500,000 K and are at 2 levels, leaving us with some of the same issues due to mobility that will only get worse over time. We love living in Sterling. It's so great that we have our own municipal light department that keeps the rates very affordable, and so far, we still have trash pickup, including in our taxes. Some affordable, individually owned, single-level living homes would be great. Even those types of homes where the neighborhood is a community with affordable homeowner association fees. So I hear that all the time. Seniors, the kids are out of the house. Maybe one of the spouses has died, and they're struggling to pay taxes on too big of a home than they need. They would love to downsize into something smaller here in Sterling, but right now we don't have anything for them. So seniors in that situation, that's our target audience for many of these zoning changes. as well as families just starting out. And we want to tackle our affordable housing issue. At the forum, we heard a desire for smaller homes on smaller lot sizes, just not concentrated in one location. So the first zoning proposal is a combination multifamily and senior housing bylaw. When we began working on this over the summer, they were two separate bylaws trying to reconfigure our existing multifamily housing bylaw. That's been rarely used since its adoption, and a recent multifamily housing proposal revealed several flaws in the bylaw. But we were also working on a senior housing bylaw. And since both bylaws had so many commonalities, they're both essentially multifamily housing. They both have density standards, setback standards, and open space standards. We thought we would combine the two and include design provisions for those over 55 housing developments that would help address mobility. So our intention was to encourage starter homes for new families and smaller homes for seniors looking to downsize. So our multifamily and senior housing bylaw, what is changing? Adding a provision for senior housing developments, that's a big one, and changing multifamily and senior housing to a by right use instead of one requiring a special permit from the zoning board. We started out working with the zoning board on revisions to the multifamily housing bylaw. Unfortunately, we couldn't come to agreement on how to do that. So we're presenting something that the planning board has put together, and I'll leave it to the zoning board members here to say their piece on what they want for the multifamily housing bylaw. But I think one of the things that has kept your multifamily housing bylaw from being used as much as it could have been is requiring a special permit as opposed to allowing that use by right. So that's why we've changed it to a by right use instead of special permit. We are reducing the number of units per building from 8 to 4. We are allowing a density increase for duplexes and multifamily units. It was 1 unit per 15,000 square feet. Now it's 1 unit per 10,000 square feet. But we decreased the density for single-family homes. It's now 1 per acre and 2 per acre if senior housing. And we are requiring that at least 25% of the proposed buildings to be multifamily, triplexes and quadplexes, and the remaining 75% can be single families, duplexes, or a combination of both. One of the flaws that we found in our current multifamily bylaw with a recent development proposal was somebody proposed a bunch of single-family homes on one piece of land, saying, well, it's multiple homes on one piece of land, therefore it's multifamily, right? That was not the intention. The intention of the multifamily housing bylaw was to get some multifamily housing units. So we don't mind having single-family mixed into such developments, but we don't want them to be exclusively single-family homes. We're increasing the distance between buildings from 15 feet to 25 feet, and the setbacks from adjoining properties and public ways will be 40 feet for all the housing types. Right now, that 40-foot setback is only for duplexes. If you wanted to build single-family or triplexes or quadplexes, it would need to be 100 feet under your current bylaw. So what's staying the same? The open space requirement will still be 60% of the entire property, and the minimum parcel size will remain 5. So what will multifamily housing look like? Well, more like this. This is a duplex on the left side, and that's a triplex on the right side, and not like that. So I'm going to stop here with this and get folks' feedback. Yes, sir.
Fred Fine at Stone Place. I've went through in years past dealing with multifamily, with condo development, right? And it was very important that you had the special meetings to review, not by right. Now, they didn't pay much attention to us, right? And they still didn't follow the actual zoning laws for multifamily when they actually built it, right? But to turn around and make changes like this and then say it's by right really goes in the face of the citizens of the town, and particularly abutters to these things, that they won't have any opportunity at all to at least be heard, even if they're told to shut up and sit down.
Well, you would still, you would still get a right to be heard, because these things still have to go through site plan review with the planning board. Site plan review is when the planning board looks at the fully engineered plans, something the zoning board doesn't get. Abutters are notified, they're allowed to speak at the meeting, but that's when we sort out the planning details regarding landscaping, lighting, parking, the septic, the water, and all of that. But if your point is you'd like to see it remain by special permit?
By special permit, right? But the other piece is, with all the hearings that I and all the abutters went to over the time, right, they still presented plans to the planning board that didn't comply with the actual zoning rules, and nobody picked it up. They didn't do the lighting that was required. They didn't do the plantings that were required. And I now face a 3-level instead of a 2-level multifamily housing, and I have no recourse, but at least I did my best, and the neighbors did our best to fight it when we could, even though we were told to sit down and shut up at the meetings. So that's where I'm coming from, that, yeah, you want to have more housing for seniors, you want to have more for young people. I lived in a lot of places, right? I couldn't afford to live where I wanted to live when I started out. I had to move, make money, save money, and over years, then finally settle down. I've been in town for 30 years, right? And I see it changing more and more to be like Framingham, and less like the semi-rural town that it was. And that you need to, and there's a lot of people that feel that way, and you need to really keep that in mind.
Thank you. Yes.
Dan Busby, One Deborah Lane. And to pick up really on what he was talking about, and in all fairness, to be clear on this, the change that you're talking about from it being a special permit with the zoning board, the process that is, at least in your proposal, the way that you're talking about it, the site plan review approval does not require the kind of due diligence that the current bylaws require. And the fact is that going to bylaw means the difference between being able to actually say no to one of these for some reason, and there's 8 criteria that are listed in the current bylaw, which the zoning board needs to consider. Those things are things like safety, appropriateness in the community, economic requirements. Approval of a site plan does not require any of those kinds of considerations. It's consideration about, does the plan meet the bylaw directives?
Yep.
Size, setbacks.
Yep.
It's not an if. So if it goes to a by right, anybody with 5 acres can build a multifamily development. It's just a matter of how big will that development be. It is not, there won't be a development. That is the change between a by right and the current process.
So you like the current process where it's 2 set of eyes reviewing these things? Okay.
Zoning board, because I think the zoning board, I think that the planning board is compromised relative to making these kinds of decisions on their own, because they have an incentive, the planning board, to get these things done. That's what the planning board does. I believe that the zoning board is more independent, and that's where this kind of decision should remain.
Okay, so since your multifamily bylaw has been on the books, so 35 years or so, there's been 4 multifamily housing projects that have gone through the process, not including the one that was recently withdrawn. Your zoning board has approved all 4 of those, but they've always done a good job of listening to the abutters and working with the developer and the abutters to right-size the development so that it does fit in with the neighborhood and comes up with something they could approve. So your point's well taken. Jim?
Yes, sir. First of all, I'd like to say, if you compare the existing multifamily dimensional and other requirements with what's proposed tonight, you see that those requirements have been watered down. One example is 5 acres. This 5 acre standard proposed tonight, whereas under the existing bylaws, if you have a certain number of units, you have to have more acreage, all right? They've reduced the sightline requirement from, for example, from one road to another road coming out to a nearby intersection from 200 feet to, from 250 feet to 200 feet.
That's not going to be changed, just so you know. That particular provision is not going to change.
All right, but it's in here.
I know, but we're going to change it back.
Another thing is, under this proposal, in the open space, they allow leach fields, whereas under the existing bylaw, no leach fields are allowed in open space, and only underground utilities are allowed in the open space. So you can do your own comparison, but I agree that the ZBA should be the eyes on this, on special permit requirement. And these are the 8 criteria in addition to those listed in section 1.6 of the bylaws. The ZBA reviews municipal costs and revenues, effect of the range of available housing choice, service to identified housing needs, service to current Sterling residents, support for local business activity, impact on the natural environment, impact on traffic safety and congestion, adequacy of water service, and the need for school facilities. Impacts on the visual environment through preservation of, or displacement of visual assets, and consistency with existing development in the area. And those 8 have been eliminated in the current proposal, and they should stick with those 8.
Okay, so I'd like to get your feedback on this. So we've combined the multifamily with the senior housing. We've heard from several parties that they'd rather see us move the senior housing out into its own bylaw. What are your thoughts on that?
Angel Brook development in West Boylston, for example, is all 55 and over. And it's like, why can't we have something like Angel Brook development in Sterling, where it's dedicated to people who are over 55?
Okay. So I'm hearing some support for a senior housing bylaw if we pull it out of the multifamily? Yes, no?
Yes, if you're going to have it, if you're going to address senior housing, address senior housing. Multifamily housing is a big dollar item for developers, and it's a big impact for abutters and citizens of the town. So you need to treat them separately so you can focus on the needs of each one. That's my opinion.
Yes. So I've looked into the 55+ housing, and actually the plan or the project that was being proposed for Planning Hill Road was a 55+ housing. What I have found, though, is, and I think this is interesting, and that we should learn from other people's experiences or mistakes, if you will. In Littleton, for instance, they went through a process where they had a bylaw for 55+ housing. And what they found is it wasn't effective. Nothing really happened. So they rewrote the bylaw. And one of the things they did find in that they did change in what they have done now, is they actually changed it to a overlay area, for one thing. It stands alone, but it is really, they set down standards for the housing that's going to be built for the disabled, for the elderly, and so that those houses would be appropriate for those people. And the unique thing that they mentioned when I looked at what they had done there, they mentioned this occurrence. If you do a 55 plus, there's a couple of things that happen. One is you have to have 55 plus, and you have to have rules that there needs to be one person at least in the house that's 55 plus or older. If that person leaves, now you go into being a group that has to decide when the people who are in there who aren't 55 need to get out. 2 years, 3 years. So you make yours, it says 2 years. So what happens when somebody is 3 years away? Do we end up in front of the planning board to decide whether, hold on, I'm just, as a, for instance. Now what I found that they found as a benefit in Littleton, the way that they approached it, they took away the 55 plus. They're not in the business of saying who can stay there or not. They're in the business of defining senior housing types of design standards. Size of doors, bedrooms on the first floor, those kinds of things. But anybody could be in those. They're designed for 55. And the one item or example they bring about is now a veteran who's disabled, who's under 55, could be in that project. They saw that as a benefit. More flexibility and not putting the town in the business of deciding who can live in a house for the future.
So Dan, you'll be happy to know that town council agrees with you on the age limit provision. If we take out that age provision, we can now apply our inclusionary housing bylaw to senior housing developments to make sure we get some affordable units out of senior housing developments. And we do have some design standards aimed at senior living in our bylaw. I'll be sure to take a look at what Littleton has and see what we can pull over into our bylaw. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. Why, from your perspective, why would you resist or not want to split multifamily and affordable housing, senior housing into two separate items?
There's no resistance on our part. We thought it made sense to combine them since they're both multifamily housing with standards for density, setbacks, and open space. Why not have the requirements be uniform for both and just include some senior housing design options?
Doesn't over 55 also imply no children living in that development?
Excuse me?
Doesn't over 55 also imply no children living in that development?
Well, we can't say that in the bylaw, but most folks over 55 don't have the kids living with them anymore.
These kind of things end up with rules, like only children over 18 can stay for 3 months or 6 months or some kind of... There's all these rules that end up having to be written.
Yes, ma'am.
No, well, my sister lives in, she lives in the over 55 development in Lancaster. And there were people there that took in their grandchildren for probably close to a year. And, and again, it was hard times, and she was her next door neighbor, and so she didn't, she didn't feel that she could say anything. But again, I'm curious about what is the enforcement? Who enforces these laws? Is there any?
Our building commissioner, our part-time building commissioner.
Is that the zoning?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it
No.
Our building commissioner, who is also our zoning enforcement officer.
That's not the zoning board.
No,
No,
I understand.
no, we know.
We know too well.
Yes. Yes.
So can you give us a little more information on what the 60% open space, how that is configured, what is allowed and not allowed in that particular acreage?
Okay, open space, dedicated and used for conservation, recreation, and park purposes, outdoor education, agriculture, horticulture, or forestry, or any combination of the uses. No other uses shall be allowed except as follows. A portion of the common land may be used for the construction of leaching fields associated with septic disposal and for water supply wells if the planning board determines that such use will enhance the specific purpose of this section and promote better overall site planning. And if such areas and wells are approved by the Board of Health. If any portion of the common land open space is used for the purpose of leaching fields or wells, the planning board shall require adequate assurances and covenants that such facilities shall be maintained by a homeowner association. Portion of the common land open space can be used for ways serving as pedestrian walks, bike paths, and emergency access or egress to the development or adjacent land. Portion of the common land open space may be used for utility and drainage facilities serving the development or adjacent parcels and may be subject to easements for construction, maintenance, and repair of such facilities. The planning board shall have the authority to approve or disapprove particular proposed uses for the common land open space in order to enhance the specific purposes of the section. The open space shown on the plan shall be deed restricted as permanently open space. And one other provision that we're going to add to that, the open space must be located in the town of Sterling.
Thank you for that. Can I follow up?
Certainly.
What if you take a 5-acre parcel and 2 acres of it is upland and 3 acres is swampland, and the swampland is the dedicated 60%? Is that permissible?
60% is open space, 2 acres upland.
If the-
You're not going to get much housing on 2 acres, but yeah.
So if the wetland poses some constraints on how much development could happen on the 5 acres, does that constraint go away as if it were all upland?
No. No, that's still a limiting factor, as is steep slopes. I'm going to take the gentleman in the hat and back there. You.
Okay, okay. Way I written the bylaw change, it seems like they allowed retention basins and, you know, the leach fields as open space, and I'm just wondering what conservation or recreational purposes, if some of these, as I drive around, I see these leach fields that are now mounds on people's properties. And I wonder, okay, do we hike up these big mounds as open space recreation? Or the retention basins, are they now conservation
There's your
areas?
skating rink right there.
I'm sorry?
No, I'm kidding.
I'm just wondering, what do they do for open space as opposed to its infrastructure for the development?
So if we were to pull out the senior housing portion into its own bylaw, one of the options the planning board has is to leave our current multifamily bylaw as is, and maybe someday take another crack at working with the zoning board on coming up with something that both boards could support. And in such case, the current bylaws open space standards would still apply.
Just to follow up on what both of these gentlemen said, that you have a requirement for open space. That what happens if there's swampland or wetland, as you ever want to call it, that a developer can't build, can't do anything with, he counts that as his open space, right? He also counts his drainage swales and drainage basins as open space. So in fact, you don't wind up with open space as intended, right? And I always thought that that was a big hole in these rules, that if the guy can't do anything with the land, he shouldn't get credit for it because it's a wetland. He shouldn't get credit for it as his open space. And the same thing with drainage basins, that he shouldn't get credit with that for open space. And the other piece of it is, right, is open space has to be in certain size minimum plots. So you can't have a little quarter acre over here, a quarter acre over there. These are holes in the rules that you have now. You need to tighten up what can really be used as open space, and that has to be kind of contiguous plots of some minimum size for it to be of any value as open space as intended. Thank you.
Right now, it says 40% has to be contiguous open space.
Yeah, but that could include wetlands, drainage basins, parking areas maybe, I don't know, I'm not fully up on it.
Well, this is why we go through the exercise of bringing this before you folks. Dan?
Yeah, maybe just following up on that too, as I read it. There's probably 4 or 5 items that are exceptions to the open land use, and they all start with a portion can be used, a portion. You know, honestly, if you're going to change it, that's good, or it's going to stay the same, that's okay. The language in the proposal, though, seems so soft that it could be taken advantage of. You know, what's a portion? A portion could be 90%. And there's 4 or 5 things. Before you know it, I've used the portions using these 5 or 6 examples, and all of a sudden, where's the open space that's left?
Good point.
You know, it was pretty soft language that you wanted, that could be taken advantage of, I think.
Again, it's kind of at the discretion of the planning board. Like they said, if they didn't think that was an appropriate use of the open space to foster the project,
Yeah.
they would say.
Yeah, just like that's at the discretion of the zoning board today. So,
One more thing to use, because you mentioned it, and this was also from the experience of Flanagan Hill Road, the use of land outside of the border, the boundary of Sterling. The proposed language doesn't allow you to use land outside of the boundaries of Sterling for open land. I honestly would advocate that under no circumstances does any multi-development be able to use any land outside of Sterling. I mean, why are we going to allow
using that
some-
land for density calculations as it relates to the land in Sterling, is that your point?
My point is, what I read in the opinion of the town council was that if a municipality doesn't specifically say that you cannot use land outside of the municipality, then there is an opening there for them to do that. You need to say it in
Okay.
words.
I read that as only applying to the open space, but I'll take another look.
But it shouldn't be. Why should we allow people to be able to use space outside of Sterling?
Yeah, I agree.
And I believe that should be firmed up.
Yep, okay. We'll go back, Joe?
Steve, some of the stuff that Mr. French and Mr. Feynman were talking to on open space are in the Berlin and Boylston bylaw that you guys used as your model that address exactly what they're talking about, that were left out. That has exactly, those are the 2 towns that have pretty much the exact same bylaw with exception of density, that I don't know whether they're used or not, we should check, but those are the stuff that's already in there that they're both talking about that could be easily
Yeah.
addressed that are already in there.
Yep. Mike?
Mike Padula at Haywood Road. The only problem I have, we go all the way back to the beginning about the multifamily by right. I personally still think the ZBA should have to look at that also, because you just have more people looking at it, like the other people here said, that if one board looks at it and they don't do other things like the ZBA might, and then it should be done that way. If it's made easier for a builder or a person to come in and do multifamily without going through the 2 processes, it's going to be easier for them. You're going to have more builders doing that if it's easy. That's my, not in my town, is the goal, to have more builders.
Okay. So we're going to move on. That was good input. That was the kind of input we're looking for. Like I said, the planning board and I are going to talk about the feedback we received tonight at our December and January meetings and make the necessary adjustments. So I thank you for that. Moving on to the next one, inclusionary housing zoning. That is intended to help Sterling reach the state mandated goal of having at least 10% of its stock deemed affordable. It requires that developments of a certain size include some affordable housing units. 15% of the units must be deed restricted as affordable. It would apply to any residential development creating 8 or more units. So that would be your traditional subdivision, multifamily, or senior housing. And inclusionary zoning's been around for about 35 years. I'd say that most of the towns in Worcester County have this on the books. I wrote the inclusionary housing bylaws for Berlin and Charlton well over 20 years ago. One of the lessons we learned through 35 years of inclusionary housing, it works best in those communities where housing is going to be built regardless. So I'm talking the 495 belt and east into Boston. Out our way, it works best if you offer a density bonus, which is what we are offering to developers in this bylaw if they build more than the required affordable units. So if they build 1 extra unit of affordable housing, they get a density bonus of 2 market rate units. So that's the concept on inclusionary housing bylaw. Questions?
In regards to the density bonus, doesn't that apply in the face of all your other zoning where you specify densities and setbacks and other rules? So from my perspective, I wouldn't give a density bonus. They have the rules and you have to follow the rules regardless of what you're doing, period. That's my take.
Well, they still have to meet the setbacks. Jim?
Yes, sir. Point of law, in 2024, U.S. Supreme Court decision came down. It's called Sheets versus County of El Dorado. Talked about undue burdens on developers. That has put inclusionary zoning in the crosshairs. And just last week, on December 2nd, a developer in Cambridge filed suit to challenge the City of Cambridge inclusionary zoning law based on that U.S. Supreme Court decision, that Sheets versus County of El Dorado. So this is now in legal limbo, in my opinion. It should probably be tabled.
Well, I doubt the board's going to do that. We want to come up with something that will help us get over the 10% and thus control our own destiny.
Yeah, but maybe
So,
open yourself up for a lawsuit too.
Jim?
Just that if we reach the 10% and more houses are built in town, and then we fall below 10%, are we chasing our tail all the time? We're trying to keep up with the 10%?
Okay, so you know the state will recalculate our 10% requirement based on the decade census. So right now, our number of affordable homes that we need to come up with is based on 2020 housing count. When they do the 2030 census, it'll be based on our 2030 housing count. So we could indeed go down lower than 10% if we reach 10% in the next couple of years, depending on how many market rate houses are built in this decade.
Your inclusionary bylaw, if things were built under that, would help you keep up with that.
Yes.
That's its purpose.
Yes.
So if you're dropping down this, you're going to be building in the inclusionary zone, and you're going to prop that back up again. So you won't keep falling down. You'll come right up to it and possibly exceed it.
that is the hope, that we continue to keep pace with our affordable housing needs, and having it at 15% will get us above what gets built in market rate. Dan?
And so is this a specific area in town? that
No,
you're talking about?
it's any development of 8 units of housing or more, anywhere in town.
Just to be clear, right, this just says that you have to have this many inclusionary units in your development. It doesn't change any of the other requirements, the zoning requirements, the setbacks, the open space, this, that, and the other thing.
No, sir.
So it's a clean, says you gotta have this percentage.
Yes, sir.
Steve, just a couple of points on the inclusionary zoning. You have a section in the proposed bylaw for comparability, and the intent is that the affordable units would be basically indistinguishable from market rate units. And the language goes on to say they'd be comparable in terms of location, quality, character, and room size. Would it make sense to also add number of bedrooms? I'm just wondering if a developer could, in order to try to save money, have all the affordable units as one bedroom, for example. Would that make sense?
I think it would, but town council has told us that we can't limit the number of bedrooms for any type of housing unit.
Can we include it in the comparability?
So that's why.
We can limit the size of the structure, but we can't limit the number of bedrooms. That's what town council has told us.
So your point is it's not necessary to explicitly state that in the.
In terms, making it comparable in terms of number of bedrooms provided.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just mentioned one other point. In this section on alternative locations for affordable units, there's language in there that a developer could demonstrate a hardship, a significant hardship with respect to affordable units, and therefore locate them elsewhere. And I
If
guess
he
I'm
has
having
land elsewhere in Sterling that he wants to put those
I'm
units.
just having a hard time understanding how there could be a significant hardship relative to the affordable units that wouldn't also apply to the market rate units. So why is that section necessary, I guess, is asking.
Well, that's a fairly standard provision for inclusionary housing, giving them the option of building their affordable units elsewhere in town on land that they own, land that may be closer to other multifamily housing or near the town center.
I hear you, I'm having trouble understanding why there would be a significant hardship for only affordable units, but there
Well,
would be a
the
significant
developer
hardship.
would need to make that case. Okay. Moving on. Compact Development Overlay District. Like I said, in the forum that we had in June, people expressed the need or the desire for smaller homes on smaller lot sizes. They just didn't want to see them concentrated in one area. So now we've got the MBTA Overlay District, which is 11 acres in north of town. And I started thinking about areas in the south of town where we might be able to get some housing. And that's when I heard that the airport property was up for sale. So I reached out to the owner of the airport property, and we talked about the possibility of having some of her land rezoned for what would be known as a compact development overlay district. And that would include the residential portion of the airport property and an adjacent property under the same ownership. All right, so there's the airport right there. You see it running the north to south. The purple is the industrial portion of the property. There's Greenland Road going right down all the way there. And there's the residential portion of her property and her abutting property that she also owns. Now, she's marketing the airport property as an airport, but also as straight up industrial land. And if she does find someone who wants to use it as an airport, it pretty much knocks out this piece of property for housing, because the runway blocks off access to the residentially zoned land. There's really only about land for 10 to 20 housing units on the residentially zoned portion of the airport property. Once you get past the airport, it gets very steep up here. So there's really only room for 10 to 20 there. And then over on this abutting property with frontage on North Princeton Road, there's wetlands back here, so there's really only room for 10 to 20 units in the front of the property up here. So that's what we're thinking, an area of town where we allow smaller lots, what hopefully results in smaller homes at, that are less expensive than your traditional homes, at what they cost right now in Sterling. Thoughts? Pat? Jim?
Hey, Steve. Question I have over there is, when you did the other zoning remap on the commercial industrial land, wouldn't that be probably a good spot if we were going to rezone it to that one piece abutting the airport to industrial, since we have limited industrial space, and maybe it would make it more marketable, but you know, the whole thing on the other one was cheaper town services, less housing, increase the tax base. To me, where that abuts it, and maybe it would make it a more viable industrial site rather than that piece and then leave the compact piece up above.
Well, I did offer that option to the landowner, that if she found an industrial user that needed to expand that district, that she could come in and make her case to the planning board on that. So that's still an option, but right now she's supportive of having both properties included in the overlay district. Jim?
Yes, sir. So this is an overlay district, and this is the way you drafted it in part. All of the uses permitted in the underlying zoning district, which is rural, residential, and farming, would still be allowed in the overlay district, with the addition of multifamily development as a by right use. So there's nothing to restrict the size of houses in, because they'd be permitted as a use in rural residential and zoning as currently zoned.
Well,
So
we are going to we are going to restrict the housing size. That's something we're going to, it's not in there now, but we're going to work, now that we've heard from town council that we can't restrict the number of bedrooms, we're going to take a look at restricting the size of the houses.
All right, well, the way it's written now is you could put a McMansion on every smaller lot.
Understood. Yes, sir.
I got a question about this. This is different than the overlay district that was just voted on, correct?
This is different.
Okay. Is this targeted specifically to this property, or is it whatever the rules are, which I don't have a copy of, whatever you're proposing, does that apply to any place in the town?
Just this. Just these two properties.
And does that document that he had, as he referred to, does that specifically say these two properties?
Yes.
Okay, because he did mention rural residential and farming. And
Well, that's the zoning that's underneath these two properties.
Okay, and that's what my concern is, because there's a fair amount of land in town that is rural residential and farming.
That's
And-
about 75% of the town.
Right, right. And one thing absolutely I don't want to see, and I don't think a lot of people want to see, is this being applied blanket to all the rural residential and farming land. And
Yeah,
and what you're
not
saying,
happening.
this is targeted specifically for this.
Yes, sir, those two properties only.
Okay, now, the other underlying question on this is everything that you've talked about proposing for affordability and inclusionary and all this stuff, right? You're not building the stuff. You have developers, and developers are in business to make money. So that they will find a way to weasel through all the rules that you put there. So it's very important that whatever rules you have for any of this, even if it's a special overlay district, is very as tight as you can make it with the input of the abutters and the other citizens of the town to at least have some semblance of trying to protect the existing residents of the town.
Got it. Thank you. Mike?
I have a quick question. We're talking about affordable housing and all this stuff, these houses that are smaller. What is affordable in Sterling for like a starter home for a family? Is it 400,000? If you start at the beginning, it's like 500,000, but you gotta make 190,000. Is that what
Well,
kind of missing
okay.
the point here?
So the concept of affordable in Massachusetts is paying a third of your income
Right.
for a home. With the area median income being about 125,000, times it by 375,000. Now that's affordable in terms of the general concept of affordability. But the state only considers it affordable if there's an affordability deed restriction on the property, so that it stays affordable when it's sold. It goes to another person that makes 80% or less of the area median income.
So it's
So,
almost like a 40B kind of sort of? Because 40B is kind of like that. Correct?
yeah, this is all in 40B. So, 40B is intended to create housing for people who make 80% of the area median income. So in our region, Worcester County, that's about $100,000 for a family of four. So affordable for them would be something about in the nature of 300,000, but it needs to have that deed restriction for the state to count it. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
What you have up front there, how is that area currently zoned?
Rural residential.
Okay, when you make it, so do you make something an overlay district? Is that, am I understanding
Yes.
that? And what does that do to the rural residential bylaws? Do they have to be rewritten, or how does that impact?
This gives you additional rights.
It gives
Like
additional
the
rights to-
underlying
It
rights
lets
to
you build
rural
smaller
residential,
homes on smaller lot sizes with smaller setbacks.
But the underlying rural residential still exists, and it's still in rural residential. This is just an
So-
overlay of additional rights that they have, that they can do only on these two properties.
So like, what kind, I mean, you're building homes. So what are the additional, I guess I'm confused. as to-
Smaller lot sizes,
Okay,
small,
small lots.
reduced
So
frontage,
right now,
reduced
what's the current-
setbacks.
What is the current, is it an acre and a half
2
still?
acres.
So now it's 2 acres.
No. Currently, it's 2
Currently, it's 2 acres. So when you make the overlay district, you're changing the size of the lot with a smaller.
Yes.
Okay, but you're not creating any industrial activity or light industrial
No,
activity?
no.
Okay, thank you, you answered my question,
Sir.
thank you.
And just a quick point, you mentioned deed restrictions in this. Now, I don't know how it works here in Massachusetts, but in other areas, right, a developer can buy out a deed restriction, like they had restrictions for farmland, things like that, when it's to his advantage, his or her advantage, he can buy it out. Is there any thought to how that plays?
Yeah, and a lot of the inclusionary housing bylaws have such a provision. We looked at that and decided not to include it in our bylaw for this reason. That allows the developer to buy his way out of providing the housing. It gives us the money, and now it puts the onus on the town to build that affordable housing with the money that he buys, that he uses to buy out his obligation. Sterling's not in the home building business. We want the developers to provide the affordable units, not buying their way out of it.
So, as I understood what you said, right, the way you're structuring it, there's no buyout of the restrictions.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jim?
Yes, sir. That's exactly why the developer in Cambridge sued the city of Cambridge over the inclusionary zoning district, because the burden is on the developer, and the developers are in business to make money. So it's a hardship for developers, and it infringes their protected property rights under the U.S. Constitution as decided by Sheets versus County of El Dorado. So you're opening yourself up to a federal or state lawsuit if you pass this.
Well, we'll see if that lawsuit goes anywhere in Massachusetts. Okay, let's move on. Now we're into the more minor zoning amendments. Building department has been getting a lot of calls about people using truck boxes, Connex boxes, and steel storage units in the residential district and calling them accessory structures. In an effort to preserve Sterling's rural character, we're looking to prohibit the use of Connex boxes and truck boxes and steel storage units as accessory structures. We're willing to allow them for a short duration while there's construction going on the property, and we will include an exemption for farms and agricultural operations, Sterling being a right-to-farm town. But we don't think it's in keeping with the town's rural character to allow truck boxes and Connex boxes all over your residential zoning districts. So that's what's behind that bylaw. Sir?
Steel storage unit, does that prohibit the steel sheds?
No, no, it doesn't.
Just reading that, okay.
No, those big metal truck boxes. Sir?
There's no zoning against that now?
No. No, that's why the building commissioner's been getting a lot of complaints from neighbors saying they look like hell. So that's,
Question. Would a trailer, like a living trailer, camping trailer, qualify as an accessory structure?
not if it's used for residential purposes.
Storage?
For storage, it probably would, yeah.
But for living, it's generally no, correct?
I don't know that Sterling allows trailers, people to live in trailers here. I don't know that answer.
Okay, just a question.
Yeah. Blaine?
Yeah, I have a question about these steel storage units, because I've seen very attractive constructions and housing made out of them that, it's kind of hard to say what is attractive to one person and not another. Now, if you have something that's just sitting there and rusting, that's not what I'm talking about. But there are hotels and made out of these things. There are like really beautiful structures.
Well, that would not preclude one of these being turned into an accessory dwelling unit. But just to be used for storage of junk.
Oh, that's okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. I understand.
Okay. Mike?
So, I think this is a good idea, but now if you got a trailer truck, a 40-foot trailer truck box in your yard and you're storing stuff in it and the truck is registered, whether you use it or not, is that gonna be a loophole in that thing?
That's a good question.
So putting a sign on it that's registered.
Let me talk with the building commissioner.
I'm just throwing that
No,
out
no,
there,
that's-
it's a loop, you know.
That's why we do this. Okay. Next issue. Updating our definition section. Many of our current definitions are open to interpretation and need clarification. Several of our definitions are not in line with state definitions, and we added several new economic development uses at the last town meeting that we want to add to the zoning bylaw. So that's our intent with the new definitions. Questions, comments? Moving on. And we've got two minor zoning amendments. Right now, if you have a driveway that fronts on a state road, you need to get a special permit from the zoning board. That's because Sterling limits the width of driveways to 18 feet, but the state, if you're going to have a driveway that fronts on a state road, they require 22 feet. So right now, anybody who has a driveway or wants to build a driveway that fronts on a state road, they've got to go to the zoning board for a variance. And so we want to clean that up and make it so that if you front on a state road, you follow the state's driveway width requirement. Yes, sir.
Does that mean that the zoning board or the planning board has no say in where that actually cuts in to the road? If you just
No,
say,
the state determines they're the ones who grant their driveway permits. So they're going to determine where it goes.
where on the frontage it would go?
Yes. So that's how they do it now. It's just now that they don't have to go to the zoning board because they're trying to follow the state's width requirements. It's just one less hassle. And the last thing, for the groundwater protection district, we want to align the depth to water table requirement for new septic systems. Our current standard is 6 feet to depth of water table, and the state standard is 4 feet. So, Board of Health and the author of the groundwater protection district suggested that we align our standard with the state standard. So that's what we're doing there.
What's the groundwater protection district?
You have a large overlay district known as the groundwater protection district that limits,
Over aquifers?
yes,
That's what that's referring to? The
yes, yes. That's on the books right now. Blake.
Make the recommendation that you, instead of using a number, you refer to the state standard so that when the state standard changes, you don't have to rewrite this.
Okay, state standard hasn't changed in many a year, but that's a,
I was owner of a building that where they went from 2 feet to 4 feet, and it meant, and they did
okay.
that. So they
Yeah.
did do that,
Yeah,
and that
okay.
is in my lifetime and fairly recent in my lifetime. So, and when they changed that, and I'm not saying that they would change it again, but it just seems to me that if we actually refer to the state standard with language, you know, you don't have to rewrite the whole thing and go to a town meeting if they change it to 5 feet. You know, you don't, it just seems like excessive use of energy.
point well taken. Okay, so, next slide, please. Oh, yes, sir.
I just got a question, backtracking a little bit, but with all this higher density housing that you're proposing, I wonder what the impact is to the light board, the Sterling Municipal Light Department, and its ability to feed all this new housing, and the water department for the water system, right? I don't know how that comes in to how your planning board, the other ones look at that, because that, I could just see this putting a massive burden on the existing residents of the town to upgrade power system and water system. So you need to kind of keep that in your back of your mind as you
All
go.
of these bylaw proposals have been shared with every town department and asked for them to review them and get us their comments. Neither DPW nor the lighting department has any issues with what we put together here. And when we finalize the zoning amendments in January, they'll go out to the departments one last time to say, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Well, my question is really saying, okay, who's looking at the impact of all this development on the utilities that are in existence now? Because, you know, the light board, if it's a regular utility, if somebody builds it, they've got to supply power to it. Well, we're municipal, so it's a little bit different, right? The water system, everybody likes building in Sterling because you have town water. Well, I could just see all of a sudden the utility systems in this town, if all this building takes place, being overburdened, and then all the residents now that are now on the system got to pay through the nose. So everybody needs to pay attention when all this stuff comes up for a vote, you know, to say that they may be really hitting you in your wallet for electricity and water. And thank you for letting me bring that up.
Jim?
Yes, sir. When you were going over definitions, I was trying to find my sheets here, but I have an issue with the definition of structure. I'll read the existing definition. A combination of materials to form a construction, including, among others, buildings, stadiums, tents, reviewing stands, platforms, staging, observation towers, water tanks, play towers, swimming pools, trestles, sheds, shelters, fences over 6 feet high, display signs, flagpoles, masts for radio antennas, courts for tennis or similar games, backstops, backboards, semicolon. The term structure shall be construed as if the following, followed by the words or a portion thereof, in quotes. A vessel shall not be considered to be a structure. Your new proposed definition is vague, ambiguous, and open-ended, and it reads as follows. This is the new one proposed. A combination of materials assembled at a fixed location to give support or shelter, such as a building, retaining wall which retains 4 or more feet of unbalanced fill, fences over 7 feet high, swimming pools that contain water over 24 inches in depth, and 250 square feet of surface area or the like. The word structure shall be construed where the context requires, as though followed by the words parts thereof. So you left out a whole list of what are real structures, and you left this proposal vague.
All right. Let me talk it over with the building commissioner and see if he can live with our current definition. I don't have a feeling either way.
I think some things should be taken out, like nobody would, no abutter would be concerned about a flagpole, for example, or a tent, for example, for temporary social function like a wedding. I think fences over 6 feet high rather than fences over 7 feet high should stay in there. A mast for a radio antenna that's a ham antenna may not be too obtrusive, but a big radio tower for a radio station would be. And you should probably put cell phone towers in there too.
Well, there's a special bylaw for cell phone towers.
Sir, if I may just make a comment on that. I don't have that rule in front of me, but I'm sure, right, what gets impacted is setbacks.
It's right there. See?
Right. So as you fiddle with these structure things, you got to keep in mind that what's important isn't necessarily the structure, but it's a required setback for the.
Setbacks aren't changing. All this is doing is defining what a structure is.
Right, but say there's a party pavilion, right? If it's not included in what a structure is insofar as a setback is, they could put a party pavilion right on the property line with no setback. And that's where you get in trouble when you start
Setbacks
taking
apply
stuff
to
out.
structures.
Right, that's why I brought this up, because your current proposal is too vague.
All right.
Yeah, there was one thing that I did want to bring up, that we kind of went over when you had mentioned that the proposal said that we're going to go from 250 feet to 200 for the sight lines.
Yeah, we're going back to 250.
Yeah, you know, my experience with the Flanagan Hill Road development, you know, in that discussion, you know, there was sort of debate over what it should be and whether, and it's really a safety issue. And what I found is there's actually a standard out there that defines everything that has to do with sightlines. And in fact, and I'm an engineer by training, and it makes sense because it changes the distance depending on what the expected traffic situation is, how fast, what the speed is, what the elevation of the road is, whether there's a curve or not. It's a standard, and it's a standard that's available from the government.
Is it the AASHTO standards?
It is the AASHTO standard.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm just wondering, for safety reasons, this is about safety. It doesn't have anything to do with anything really but safety. Can we consider just referencing that standard as the standard? Then there won't be any debate. It'll be consistent no matter what.
Yeah, I think we can. I ran by the site distance change to our consulting engineer and DPW. I don't know if they considered just simply referencing the AASHTO standard, but I can certainly inquire with them as to whether that would make sense in this case.
I mean, the light bulb went off for me is that one size doesn't fit all. You know, depending on what the geometry is of this intersection, you may want to have different solutions.
Yep.
And people have done all the work and all the engineering to do it, and it's in tables.
Yep, very good.
That's the one thing I would
Thanks, Dan.
think you'd look at.
Well, gang, what happens next? Like I said, Planning Board is going to spend its December and January meetings revising the zoning proposals based on the input we've received. Going to have our required public hearing in March, and then whatever we come up with, it's off to town meeting in May of 2026. So thanks for coming out tonight. I think we had a lively discussion. Please help yourself to some cookies on your way out. And if you think of anything else between now and town meeting, you can always contact me. Give me a call, send me an email, drop by my office next time you're in the municipal building, and we'll talk. Thanks, everyone.